Happy Thanksgiving to all of you coming up, or depending on when you pull our podcast on, it might be even just after. But Dave and Tiff here with you for another episode of Dave and Tiff Sports Podcast. And we got an exciting one today. This is our Thanksgiving edition because we're going to have special guests. We like to get some of our former Hawaii folks who are doing things on the mainland and having some success there. So as you can always tell, if you're watching on Facebook, you can see Tiff's background has something to do with University of Missouri. And our guest is going to be the head women's volleyball coach from Missouri, Josh Taylor, a Punahou alum, All-American from Pepperdine. And what's interesting, Tiff, when you think about women's volleyball, in Hawaii, we're thinking, well, there's nothing going on. But the SEC was it the only conference to allow some women's volleyball action in this fall?
The SEC, along with the Big 12, along with the ACC for a little bit, and the Southland Conference. And there are a couple of other teams that had a portion of their 2020 fall season. Like you said, we'll talk with Josh Taylor. His Tigers ranked 8th in the top 15 coaches poll, 6-2. They won 4 straight, won their 2 matches over the weekend against Ole Miss, at Ole Miss in Oxford. So a very well-rested, and I'm sure a head coach that is looking forward to a little bit of a break because a lot of other schools didn't have women's volleyball in the fall.
Yeah, so it was an 8-game season for Missouri and the SEC. So it was something. I mean, I think we can all appreciate something versus nothing. And in many ways, fans, the players, and all that, they could at least have some action. And as a team, I would think, and Josh can attest to it when he comes on, is, they will have like a spring season, like when they're not in season, but to actually play in the fall. And supposedly they're going to have games in the spring as well, right?
Yeah, the NCAA a few weeks ago said January 22nd. They're looking at that as the target start date for women's volleyball for the spring. Again, nothing as far as a Big West announcement, which will impact the Rainbow Wahine for the University of Hawaii. Non-conference, we don't know, and it's the same thing across the board for the Big West, and same thing for the men's volleyball team. No schedule from them, nothing from the Big West, and we haven't heard exactly when. There's a target date for the men's season, which normally starts the first couple of days after the new year. So we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I think we say that every week, every time we do a podcast. Wait and see, no matter what we're talking about. So we'll talk with Josh a little bit later, but some other things happening. And what caught my attention over the weekend, and it was kind of a connection with another athlete, but in the NFL, Joe Burrow ending his season because of a devastating knee injury. He had to be carted off. And what was a pretty promising rookie season, granted he was taking his lumps with the Bengals, but it kind of tags on to just a few days earlier where the news came out that from the NBA, Klay Thompson from the Golden State Warriors playing pickup basketball tore his Achilles. So he's going to be out for this next season coming up. And I mean, I'm not a big Warrior fan, but naturally a lot of NBA fans were looking forward to see Thompson as well as, getting them back to the way they were and seeing how he would come back from injury. Now he's out, Joe Burrow out, and brings to thought of some of these other season-ending injuries in sports with very pivotal athletes and how they've kind of either impacted their career, their team, and whether they could rehab and come back. And one of the most recent one comes to mind, I think of LeBron James, right? I mean, he not this past season where they won the NBA title, but the season before, his first with the Lakers, injured his groin out, Lakers sucked. I mean, now granted that's LeBron, but you can see how a season-ending injury rather, really affects a team.
Well, and also you mentioned one of the ones that have been some of the most recent. How about Tua Tagovailoa? It's been almost a year since his injury. He's now been the starting QB for the last 3.5 ball games for the Dolphins. Sure, they lost on the road at Denver this past Sunday. But you talk about LeBron, we talk about Tua. How about Mackenzie Milton for what he sustained almost 2 years ago, right around this time? The quarterback at UCF, he's now been cleared. He's really helping out Dylan Gabriel. And we've also mentioned Derrick Rose. That was another part of your email string that you had earlier today. And just injuries, they're so it's tough. And yes, the Bengals and the Washington football team weren't on major television yesterday, but when that injury happened and it started to circulate around the internet, and you saw the former number 1 pick Burrow with number 2 pick Chase Young from Washington they had a moment together. I don't know if you saw that picture on social media, but just the fact that the Bengals are 2-7, they're in last place in the AFC North, but he has looked very good. And this is a team that they've not had Joe Mixon for the last couple of weeks. AJ Green is kind of on the downward slide of his very good career, and just Burrow's played very well. Yes, the record doesn't show it, but the Bengals had their future quarterback, their franchise quarterback, and now they're going to have to be without him for at least a year.
And of course, it goes with development. You brought up Derrick Rose, and there is one injury that ended, I think it was 2 years. He was out for 2 years. I think he injured, and he sustained another. He tried to come back and re-injured it. So really it was 2 seasons that he was out, and he never got back to that form that he had, because just before that, he was the MVP. The Bulls were the team of the East. And then after that, it not only affected his career, he never came back to his level. It affected the Bulls. They were never again the team of the East, and they went on this downward slide. Mackenzie Milton, who hits home here in Hawaii, I mean, he was Heisman Trophy candidate. UCF was one of the mid-majors that was making some noise, having undefeated seasons. I mean, as much as, I don't want to be a pessimist, but, I really don't think, I don't know if he'll be able to play again, because his recovery, although cleared, whether he's able to take some contact is another story. And then you got fellow Mililani alum Dylan Gabriel doing so well. So he's only a sophomore. So will Mackenzie Milton see the football field again? And that kind of relates to Alex Smith, right? Alex Smith of the Washington football team. He had almost a similar, that devastating type of knee injury, almost died, but has recovered and has played. In fact,
he's won.
Playing and
he's won a couple games.
So he has come back after what people thought, no way he could put some pads on, much less they were just happy he didn't lose his leg. So these are some injuries that, it impacts them as a player, as a person, and the team, sometimes the entire franchise, not just for a season, like with the Chicago Bulls and Derrick Rose. As we've gone through, this crazy 2020 sports and the pandemic, you're hearing, obviously college football has had more issues with cancellations and postponements of games. NFL, to me, is doing surprisingly well. They've had some issues. A player here, a cluster there. The Raiders, having a little cluster with them. And some of those clusters are not so much positive tests, but because one person in a position group tests positive, they have to isolate and quarantine the entire offensive line, or 5 people from the offensive line, so to speak. But, it's one of those things where if people thought or expected no positive results or no obstacles such as these to happen, to me, realistically, that was not going to happen and is not going to happen. So unless that is your standard, which is unrealistic, to me, college ball and the NFL have actually done quite well in terms of getting a season going, playing as games and having protocols to handle if situations arise, and moving forward, not just moving back, but trying to move forward as best they can. And as I've always said, do the best you can with the information you got, but try and move forward with the best resources you have.
Well, it's also tough in the collegiate game. Yesterday we found out that the Apple Cup, a rivalry game with Washington and Washington State, that's going to be declared a no contest. Second straight game for Wazoo that they will not be able to play due to COVID. It's gone through the Pac-12. It's hit the Mountain West. Thankfully, Hawaii has not been a part of this situation as of yet. And this one's going to be curious because college basketball starts on Wednesday, something that hits very close to both you and myself. And you're asking collegiate basketball teams to fly when there are restrictions right now that are posing on people to, if you're not flying for non-essential travel, again, you're asking college athletes to fly to play non-league games. How essential are non-league games? Yes, I know fans want to see the product on the court, but you're putting young men and young women between the ages of 18 and 22 in harm's risk. And yes, you have the protocols and health procedures and everything in place, but at the end of the day, you've got to look out for the health and welfare of everybody involved. And yes, to an extent, the NFL has done very well. Yes, the NBA, Major League Baseball, the NHL, everybody for the most part did a bubble, and that was great. It's going to be very tough once we hit flu season. Once you start to see peaks come about, it's going to be very tough to have these games scheduled, because we're a month away from the Wahine basketball season starting at Cal Poly in December, right? A couple days after Christmas. It could be very tough. And we already know CSUN's not going to be playing because they have half the roster opting out. Another player couldn't leave their country, so they were down to 6 players. So Big West is already down to 11 teams. Thankfully, you had UC San Diego and CSU Bakersfield, but it's going to be very tough in the next month and a half to get all these non-league games in, and league games for that matter.
Yeah, I know traveling to, especially having teams travel here, will be a challenge. And, you know, from what I heard, I don't know if it's been made official, but they're trying to make the NCAA men's tournament a bubble within Indianapolis and using just all the venues there to hold every round of the NCAA tournament in Indianapolis. It sounds like a good idea, a good concept. Indiana as a state, although cases are rising, so I don't know how that will factor in, and maybe that's why the decision hasn't been made official yet. But again, hopefully they can, you know, proceed positively. And it brings up the situation that happened just this past weekend, right? Between a football game, Clemson traveling to Florida State. So what happened was this game was scheduled. Clemson traveled to Florida State. A player who did not have, I believe, had some minor symptoms earlier in the week, tested negative on Friday, made the travel party into Tallahassee, and then was told, this Clemson player was notified that the test he just took prior was positive. So he had taken a test maybe a day earlier, negative, allowed to travel, and then when he got into Tallahassee, positive. So Clemson's administration, despite all the protocols with the ACC, said, nope, we can't play. So that's, Florida State officials saying that because the Clemson player tested positive. So after that, Clemson's head coach, Dabo Swinney, goes on record as saying that, oh, they're just using COVID-19 as an excuse to not play. They wanted, in other words, they wanted a reason to duck out of playing us and possibly getting blown out. So his argument is, we followed all the ACC protocols. He was negative when he left. My Clemson player took a test just before the flight. It came out positive. They did all the protocols with him. It should have been okay. What do you think?
If all the health officers and whatnot, if they don't approve it, I go with the health officers all day long. And I know the kids want to play. I know the young men and women want to play. But at the end of the day, if you don't have enough scholarship players, and I think for football it's 52 or 53, you've got to have healthy and having the negative tests. If that's a go, then you're fine. If you fall under that category, and if the health screeners, if they're the ones that look through all the tests, if they deem you to be either a false positive, then, you know, test again. Because all these conferences, and the Mountain West is doing this, where you're testing players 3 times a week. And so if you're able to, you know, do these multiple tests, and if you don't pass, I'm sorry, I have to cite with all the health officials that are doing all these screenings, because at the end of the day, you're wanting the health and safety of everybody first. Yes, I know we want the games, we want to see it on TV, we want to hear it on the radio. But again, these are college athletes, 18 to 22, some are 23. Well, some in Provo are like 25, 26. But we want these kids, are 30, yes. But at the end of the day, we just want everybody to be as healthy as can be.
You know, it's one of those things where you can think it. Maybe it's not appropriate to say it. But the Clemson argument has some validity in the sense that one of the things that Coach Dabo Sweeney brought up was his star quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, testing positive, was not able to play for 2 weeks because of the protocols that the ACC had. Now, the week before the first game that he missed, he was practicing, and it was somewhat similar. He practiced, he had no symptoms, but then at the end of the week, he had a test that came out positive and therefore could not play that Saturday's game. So the same instance where he was practicing with the team in meetings that week leading up, and yet that game played, that first Saturday where Trevor Lawrence couldn't play. So it's somewhat similar to this situation. This player was involved, testing negative, tested positive just before a game, and then suddenly saying, we can't play. Now, as far as I read, the 53-player scholarship minimum was met. So everything was okay to play except Florida State officials, and not the head coach, but the administration said, we're not playing. So I can see there being it kind of gives you both sides of how this whole pandemic brings you, right? There's those that are more, hey, let's be really safe and sure, which there's going to be a lot of support on, like how you feel. And there's those who are saying, look, we followed everything should be okay, so we should be able to do it. And that's just the kind of the two ways of thinking.
Well, and at the end of the day, yes, Clemson needs games because, well, they lost in double overtime at Notre Dame. And sure, they dropped out of the top spot for which they had the last, year and a half, 2 seasons that they've been the top team. But they're going to get another crack because if they can run the table, thankfully for them, Notre Dame is playing in a conference this season. They're no longer independent here in 2020. They're in the ACC. So Clemson, if they continue to run the table, they're going to have an opportunity to get that game back in an ACC title game. And should they win that, there's no issue with Clemson being in the top 4 because not a lot of teams, you lose a game, your season's done. And that's just how the college football playoff system has been. Is if you're in the Power 5 and you lose a game, but you lose it early enough, and you can get to your conference title game and win that, you're more than likely in the top 4 in that semifinal, in one of the 2 semifinal games.
Yeah, there's a part of me for Clemson saying, oh, come on now. Gee whiz, you're still going to make the Final 4. Let's not worry. If anything, you can rehab from your injuries over this week and prepare for the next game and blow out your next opponent. Trevor Lawrence is back. Give me a break. But, yeah, I understand their point. But that is football in a pandemic. Well, we're joined by our special guest, head coach of women's volleyball at the University of Missouri. And he's a former Punahou alum, All-American from Pepperdine, Josh Taylor, joining us. Coach, thanks for coming on.
Dave, Tiff, I appreciate you guys having me on. It's great to see you both.
And you just came off a win, University of Mississippi. We'll get to your season, which I'm sure you're thankful you had granted a bridge season, but you had one. But you made a little comment about before we came on about Tiff's background there, and that's your arena. Is that really how it looks? Are those all banners along the sides there?
Yeah, it's crazy. So it's actually, I don't know the exact amount, but it's over 12,000 seats in our arena. And it was the old basketball arena, actually. And back in the day, they used to fill it when men's basketball would play, when they're in the Big 12. And we don't get quite that many fans, but you can move those up and down. So it kind of makes the gym feel smaller. And we average around 2,500 people. And that's kind of the lower bowl there. That you see, and we've got risers that come out onto the court, but that is what it looks like. It's a pretty awesome place to call home.
Oh, it looks great. And you're in your second season as a head coach at Missouri. Are you I was reading your bio, and you're young. Are you like the youngest head coach in the SEC or the country?
I haven't quite looked that up, but I'm only 20, and I am very young. I've had a pretty unconventional route to becoming a head coach, and I'm really grateful to be where I'm at. It is definitely not a profession where you see many under 30 head coaches in a Power 5, so I'm pretty fortunate.
Coach, it's been a while. Last time I saw you and your team, we were in Waco for the Baylor Classic, so it's been about a year and a couple months since we saw you guys. But how thankful your conference, along with the ACC and the Big 12, and I think the Southland as well, had some sort of a season. How thankful were you to have a shortened season in the fall with the SEC.
Yeah, extremely grateful. I think, all these matches count towards an NCAA seeding and the tournament that's going to be played in April, and that's great. I think the thing that I'm thankful for most is that we didn't just have to train for 4 months in the fall, and that would have been something that's so grueling. In practice, it doesn't take long for you to get tired of beating up on your own teammates. You want to play an opponent and you want to prepare for someone, and you learn your teammates' tendencies and you get really frustrated with one another, and that'd be a long time to just practice. So actually getting to implement what we're training and team system wise as well as individually, and really grateful for it. I think it's one of those things that kind of provided some normalcy to how crazy this year has been for our girls. So more than anything, I'm just grateful that it kind of kept us in a good mental state, kept us motivated, and gave a lot of meaning to practice each day.
Ranked 8th, you folks finished 6-2, 4-match win streak with the 2 losses against Kentucky. What were some of your biggest takeaways in this shortened COVID fall season?
You got to be ready for anything. And what I mean by that is our first match against Kentucky, our starting middle, Tiana Omazic, she went down with a torn ACL in the first set. I think the score was 4-5. And I've told many people this. I would have probably bet my salary on her being a first-team All-American this year. She was just playing incredible volleyball. And so that was really, really tough. And we lose that match. We lose the second match. And then the next day, my starting senior outside decides to opt out for the season due to COVID concerns, which is totally understandable. And then 2 days later, my backup setter breaks her hand in practice. So it was wild. You got to be ready for anything, and you got to be malleable when it comes to crazy situations. And on top of that, I think it further affirmed that there's so much more to life than volleyball. How you taking care of your kids and how you keeping them motivated on things off the court. And there's a lot going on. There was COVID. There was racial injustice. There was the presidential election. I mean, it's just been wild. And on top of that, we've had several injuries. So to come out 6-2, I'm really happy with it. And but overall, I'm just really proud of our girls responding to all the adversity they faced.
Like we said, a couple of conferences had some sort of a season. What were some of the biggest day-to-day things? I mean, you talked about it's a COVID season, so expect basically anything. But just how different were the last couple of months with volleyball being played in the SEC?
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy different. We had a bunch of matches and matchups postponed due to contact tracing, kids testing positive, which is one of those things where we knew would be inevitable, so we were prepared for it. But I think our team had to quarantine 4 times over these last 3 months. So, me and the staff, we turned into Grubhub drivers. We were delivering our kids food every single day. And so that was one thing that wasn't in my contract when I signed, but I got good at it. But I think along with that, you realize that everyone's going through it and everyone's struggling alongside you. And how are you going to take advantage of the time that you've got today to be great? And if you can finish something today, you better not be putting it off till tomorrow, because your opponent is going to be taking care of that today. And, my girls hear me say this probably too much, but you're either getting better or you're getting worse. And that's on the volleyball court. That's in life. That's in the classroom. And how you take advantage of every opportunity you get is what defines you. So I thought we did a pretty good job of, taking advantage of what we had. I mean, we had a couple weeks where we just had 3 kids in the gym who had previously already tested positive, so they didn't get traced. But, the other 10 of our kids were in quarantine for 2 weeks. And you got to find ways to adjust. And, in those 2 weeks where we just had those 3 kids, we finished every single day of practice, them against the coaching staff in deep court, just to keep things light. And it was hard on them because the coaching staff never lost, of course. I mean, we wouldn't lose, but, we kept things light, and, you got to find ways to get better each day. And I think we did a pretty good job of that.
I was waiting for a Marvism to come out of that with your 3 kids on the floor with you, with the coaching staff as well. I've not been to Columbia, Missouri. If I'm looking for Hawaiian food, how much do you miss the local food? And are you cooking at home here and there?
Yeah, here and there I am, for sure. I was just Yeah, here and there. It's tough. My sister, my youngest sister, she's actually a sophomore here at Mizzou, and she found an Asian market within the first week of living here. So we hit that place up regularly, and thank goodness Sam's Club has sashimi grade fish. So we get tuna, salmon every once in a while, and we have sushi nights. And but I mean, just to show you how much I miss Hawaiian food is when we were in Oxford, there was a place called Hawaiian Poke, and I can't remember the name of it, but it was a Hawaiian restaurant. I could tell the owners were somewhere from the islands, and I made that a priority to get a team meal from there just so I could get some poke. And definitely not as good as back, but it's got to do when you're living out in the Midwest. But that's definitely something I miss probably more than anything.
Now, recently you've gotten rid of social media, and that's probably for the better. So no longer on Instagram, no longer on Twitter. So thankfully you're not having to see your dad Graham posts pictures on Instagram of him either paddleboarding or in his one man. When you see, does he text you what he's doing, and does it make you jealous seeing him out on the water?
Oh, so much. You know, it's funny because he's working like crazy during the week, and I get a FaceTime him on the weekends, and he always does it when he's in his truck about to take the canoe off the top of his truck. I'm like, dude, you can't do this to me. He said, it's just awful. He's like, go paddle around Port Lock today, and I'm like, oh, dude, don't even talk to me right now. It's hailing outside, so it's definitely different. But he likes to rub it in my face for sure. He's all tan and jacked and getting to paddle all the time, and I no longer have a tan line. Everything's just one color, so no good.
I know that feeling, and I live here.
Oh man.
So, and I've always brought this up with you. Dave mentioned earlier, of course, you're an alum of both Punahou and Pepperdine. Coming from the Marv Dunphy School of Coaching and Teaching, what's your favorite Marvism and why?
Oh, man. That one's hard. There's a lot. I think probably my favorite is you're either getting better or you're getting worse. And I truly believe that. And after I graduated, I was like, Coach, you got to tell me more about this a little bit. And he said, when you get to higher levels of sport, changes become so minute that you got to find a way every single day to make some kind of improvement because your opponent is doing so. And when you face them, you're either going to win, you're going to lose. And that's based on you taking advantage of those moments you had to get better. You can't fit 10 pounds in a 5-pound sack. Anytime like there was a conversation going on and he didn't know how to end it, he'd go, oh, okay, I think we're good here. And he'd walk away. There's probably too many to count. And I think we'd have to get together as a Pepperdine team to come up with a book of that someday, because we could fill a book with everything that went on there.
We're joined here by Josh Taylor, head coach at the University of Missouri women's volleyball program, former Punahou alum, as well as Pepperdine All-American. Now, you alluded to your sister having found this market. That's your sister, by the way, small world, is a classmate with my son at Kaiser. But you have another sister, someone named Nikki Taylor, who was an All-American at the University of Hawaii. What's the latest with her?
Who? What are you talking about? But it's really funny. I was actually talking to one of my players about this the other day. I said, if we ever go to Hawaii, you can't call me coach anymore. You have to call me Nikki Taylor's brother, because that's what I'm known as. I got called that at a grocery store line one time at Long's. So talk about a hit go. But she's doing great. She's playing professionally overseas right now. She actually kind of a sticky situation with her team in Germany. She had her contract terminated. So she will be actually coming to Missouri the second week of December. And she'll be here training, lifting, and trying to find another team to transfer to. Her agent right now is talking to teams in Turkey, Switzerland, another team in Germany. So she's going to end up probably in a different country the second half of the professional season. But it's so cool to continue watching her play. When I was playing pro, I fell out of love with it very quickly. And it was something that I knew essentially kind of right away that I didn't want to do for a long period of time. And Nikki's kind of found her niche there, and she's doing really nice things and continuing to get better and making some money for it, which is pretty cool. So she's doing great things over there. And if she wants to, she could have a pretty good pro career. And I'm not sure what that looks like for her. And I'm not sure if she knows, but she's doing some good things overseas.
I'm curious though. You played professionally just like your sister, And just like your wife, which I'll ask about in a moment, but what was it about professional volleyball that kind of turned you off of it?
You're gone for 8 months of the year, and when you come back for those 4 months, you're in the national team gym training, and it's a full-time job, and of course it is. But I got tired of being away from home. I really love living in the States, and on top of that, my body was just hurting. I was, I had my shoulder done right after Pepperdine, and it was feeling really good, but I always had shin issues. I just never felt really that great. And I think that's something that's been really great for Nikki, is that she's managed to stay healthy while doing this. And, we'll talk about Molly in a second, but she did a really nice job of that as well, staying healthy. And it seemed like me, I was just kind of always nursing some kind of injury. And it's just so frustrating to be injured and not being able to play your best volleyball. So, it was that. And, my last year pro, Molly was in Italy and I was in the Middle East. And, we realized that we could both continue playing, but it'd be really hard to find teams in the same city, in the same country. And we knew we wanted to get married. So we both kind of made a joint decision there too. So a lot of things adding up, but, and it was really hard because my 4 years at Pepperdine were like that. Those 4 years are what made volleyball perfection to me. Like, I fell in love with volleyball more every single day being a part of that program. And when I went overseas, nothing could match it. So I guess thanks to Mara for ruining everything for me. But a lot of things lining up. I don't want to ramble, but a lot of things.
I just wanted to end with this. You mentioned your wife, Molly, who's your assistant coach. So this is a really volleyball family, to say the least. You got you got your wife, you got your two sisters who play, and your dad who paddles canoe. But, as far as, is there the internal rule at the home, like one of those things where you work together with your wife, Molly, and she was a great player as well, All-American, professional, that you don't bring work home? Is there that internal rule?
I would like if you would to start that rule for me, Dave, because and it doesn't work. We're so invested in our work, and we really care about our kids so much. And 4 years of college for Molly and I were the best years of our life when it came to volleyball and growing and learning who you are. And we want that so badly for all of our girls and all the girls who are going to come through the University of Missouri. So we talk about it a lot, and we're always wanting to get better. We're incredibly competitive. So not being able to play anymore, we scout the opponent's coaching staff because we're competing with the coaching when we play, and we want to beat that coaching staff. So we're always talking about it. And it's just when we brush our teeth and we're about to get ready for bed, that's when I'm like, babe, you gotta stop. You gotta stop. We're not. I need to go to sleep. I'm trying to implement that rule, Dave. But if you got any suggestions, please tell me.
Well, like you said, coaches are it's a 24/7 gig. So that's just one of those things. But I guess the beautiful thing about it is both of you can do it together, right? It's not like you're so dedicated to your job and your wife's at home and, you got to watch film again. Oh, you got to do this again. She's right there with you. So I guess that's the big positive about the relationship.
It's awesome. Yep.
Well, hey, Josh Taylor, head coach, University of Missouri women's volleyball. Congratulations on this abridged season, getting the national ranking. And we look forward to seeing how your team will do in the spring as well. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Josh. Did it.
All right, take care. Josh Taylor, head coach, women's volleyball, Punahou alum as well. So doing a lot of great things there at the University of Missouri. And people,
come on, Robin, send me to Columbia. I want some of that poke.
People don't realize when we talk about sports families, there's a lot of sports families in Hawaii where multiple either generations or siblings. That's one of them in terms of volleyball, right? You got Josh, you got Nikki, and younger sister Kylie also played with those two. Now Josh married Molly, so it's extending the volleyball family, if you will. So
it really is. And we talked about his dad. Graham was a standout basketball player at the University of Pacific, a very stand-up family, and I've been blessed to know them, that whole family, for the last maybe 12, 14 years. I actually coached Josh in club volleyball for a few seasons, and not many people remember when he first started playing volleyball, he couldn't serve the ball to the net. And now he's a multi All-American. Now he's coaching in the SEC. I'm so happy for this kid.
And it's all because of you, Tiff. It's all got his start by you.
No.
You got him growing. Our Thanksgiving edition of the Dave and Tiff Sports Podcast comes to an end. We want to thank Josh Taylor, University of Missouri women's volleyball head coach, for joining us. And also for all of you out there, have a happy Thanksgiving and
wear that mask. Be safe. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.